How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the AVB Podcast. This time I am back here in my hometown of Windsor, Ontario, sitting down once again with former guest, and but not when we were ever doing video, Mr. Christee Palace. How's it going, Chrstee?
Hello, it's good. How are you?
So good to see you again.
Yes, you too.
We were chatting before we sat down. The last time you and I saw each other was the last time you were on the show, which was like December 2016.
Minus the video, yes.
Minus the video, when we were freezing in the rondo.
Yeah, good times.
It was fun.
We should do that again.
or
sometime.
Just do. Now we're in the summertime. At least we're not sweating too bad.
That's true, yeah. Now we're in air conditioning, so we're good.
So how have you been?
I've been great. I've been busy, but great.
So normally on the show, as you already know, we start with like all your background stuff, but we've already got like a full episode of that stuff.
Yeah, just go back.
So just go listen to that episode if you want to hear all our incredible history. But I mean, we can round this up for the new people that are on here. You have a really spectacular family history when it comes to music.
I do.
You want to rip through that just really quickly?
Oh, goodness. Okay, yeah, really, really quickly. Aunts and uncles are all involved in music, and my dad is obviously a huge influence on me as a singer, songwriter, performer, everything, you name it. I grew up at the Canadian Conservatory of Music, taking lessons here, and the rest is history. My whole family's involved in music, and I've been involved with it ever since I was little, ever since I can remember. So,
except, and I don't know if I read an article with you recently about this or something, but despite the fact that you've been around all of this stuff for so long, you had a really, really hard time sort of like making it a thing, right?
I did, yeah. And it's interesting because I tell people this all the time, especially, I used to teach singing lessons here. And a lot of times I used to tell my students all the time before they would go and perform, like, it's a very normal thing to feel super nervous and, not confident at all, like you can't do it, and you start sweating and all that stuff. It took me years and years to gain the confidence to actually pursue this as a career, and but it's normal. It's normal to feel like that, and that's one thing that I have learned. I've definitely struggled, and I still do a little bit, really bad, like anxiety and stuff.
Yeah.
And
what does that look like? Because that's one thing, especially now that the surface level talk is, mental health and da-da-da. But the more I see people interact with each other and the more I see people sort of actually behave, the more I see people do not even understand what anxiety, depression, what any of that stuff even looks like. So why don't you walk through some of that with me?
Sure. I think it all just comes down to, just feeling insignificant, like you're not good enough, and you are constantly worried about what other people think of you, and that's happened to me ever since I was younger, and I'm not really sure why that is, but I always remember feeling that way, and that held me back from doing a lot of things. But I think just the simple fact of trying to please everybody, and that's a very hard thing, especially as an artist. I think you go through that a lot. But growing up for me, I've always had like that anxious type of personality, and I think that's because I was afraid of not being good enough at whatever it was that I was doing, especially music. And I don't know if that's because of the amount of talent that I had around me all the time. I don't know if I'm not really sure what it was, but I've always had it. I've always known it. And even, like I said, even today, I still have it, but now that I'm a little bit older, I've learned how to like deal with it and recognize it when it's happening. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really hold me back from things as much anymore, because I can recognize, okay, this is what's happening to you, and you're okay, and you just have to keep going, and you're fine. You'll get out and you'll be fine.
Right.
But it's difficult, especially for young kids. I can't even imagine, because back then when I had it and I didn't really know what it was, I wasn't really sure what was wrong with me. And then you start developing the mentality of like, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Am I the only person that feels this way? And it's a spiral, right? So
how long, and the question, the answer might be you're still trying to get there, but like, how long did it take you to stop waiting for permission to do shit?
When I realized that I think when I was giving up opportunities that I truly wanted, that I just wouldn't take because I was too scared. And I was, like I said, I had that anxious
Like
type of personality. So any performance opportunities growing up, even something so simple as, when I first started high school. When I started high school, no one actually knew that I could sing. And I'd been singing forever, but I just did not want to get on stage, and I don't know why, but, missing out on opportunities to perform in the talent shows or be a part of the, the choir, be a part of the, the musicals that were in school, like anything, any outside opportunities for me to perform, I would always, either I was forced to go on stage and do it, or I would just, deny any opportunity. And I think it was when I started, seeing other people doing what I wanted to be doing, and I was like, it just makes you feel like crap either way. You're like, you give up the opportunity, right? Or you do it and you're scared, and it's like, what do you do? But you come to a point in your life where you have to decide, are you just gonna let yourself sit back and let someone else take your dream for you, or are you gonna go after it and do it? And I think that's sort of what happened to me. I think, I just watched everybody else take opportunities that were coming to them, and I just was standing still for a while. And you get to a point where you're like, so am I just going to sit here the rest of my life and, not do what I actually want to do and be unhappy? And as much, as anxious as I would feel and as nervous and scared as I was, it was worse watching, all those opportunities pass me by. And then I had to sit there and go, you gave that up, and that's on you. Like, you need to just go and do it. So
tough lesson.
Tough lesson. I think so. And
do you have? Was there one specific one that stands out in your head?
Opportunity wise?
Yeah, that was the kind of the moment that you passed up, that you're like, all right, I'm done with this shit. You
know what? No, but there was an opportunity that I did take.
I was gonna say, or is it the other way around?
Yeah. So. And I think most people that know me know about this opportunity, but it was the International Children's Games. And I think you and I briefly discussed that before. But that opportunity I almost didn't take, Talk
to me about that.
So, well, and that opportunity sort of came up, and I was in university. I think it was 2013 when that was happening. And I was just starting to... Not really starting. I guess at that point I had already been, performing a little bit more, but I was still really I didn't really want to pursue it. I didn't think that I could make this a career. So I tried to keep, my performing and, sharing of my songs and my talent and stuff to a minimum. But when that opportunity came up, I almost said no because of first of all, where it was going to be, because it was at the WFCU Center. And I knew that, I think the capacity in there is like 8,000 people. Mm-hmm. And I knew it was going to be televised, and I knew
What was the biggest crowd you had played to up to that point?
I sang actually in the Coliseum when I was 19 at it was the California Dreamin' tribute show. It was a 60s tribute show. So I had done that, and I think it's 6,000 people there. So that was the biggest crowd up until that point. But yeah, I almost didn't do it, and because we were actually performing with Susie McNeil, who is a Canadian artist as well. So just knowing, and it comes back to you just worrying about what other people think and feeling like you're not good enough. And anytime I heard of anybody who had any sort of experience that trumped mine, I was like, I don't want to do it, I'm scared. But right. And that's sort of what happened, right? So I almost gave it up, but I didn't. And the reason I didn't is because my dad we won that contest. So he had written the theme song and it was chosen, so he decided to do it, and he had my voice on the recording. So it was either going to be me doing it live or somebody else was going to do it. And I was so close to saying no, but I didn't. I stuck it out, and I think that was the turning point for me, because
Do you remember the mental conversation you had with yourself through that?
Yes.
Talk to me
and
about that.
So at this point in my life, I had started doing exactly that, talking myself through it, as opposed to just saying no and, dismissing it. So that opportunity in particular, I remember saying to myself, like, my immediate reaction was like, no, don't do it. And I started shaking and I was like sweating and I'm like, you can't do it. Like, what if you crack in front of people, or what if you forget the words, or you start going through every negative thing that you could. And yeah, I almost didn't do it. But then I reeled myself in and I said, okay. So like what I started doing was, and something that a lot of people don't know about me is that when I was in university, I actually, I went to see a psychologist. And I did that for that reason, because I had really bad anxiety and I just couldn't deal with things that were happening around me. I get overwhelmed and like I start talking myself out of things because of all, my insecurities. And so that was around that time. So I had started actually, dissecting what was going on, and I said to myself, okay, like you're nervous, of course, because it's a brand new opportunity. And I started talking myself through it, like just do the opportunity, because you know that you've done this in the past where you give stuff up and then you feel even worse later, right? And I knew at that point that, I kept coming back to music as much as it was, scary for me. I always went back to it somehow. And so I said, give yourself this chance to enjoy this opportunity. Like, why are you doing this to yourself, And I did. It was hard. It was very, very, very difficult. But after that performance...
How old were you?
So I would have been 23.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe a question you don't even have perspective on.
Sure.
How much of that do you think is just growing up?
I'm sure a lot of it was. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of it was. Because, however, I do think that talking to somebody helped me. I think they gave me the tools to sort of like help myself go through stuff like that and realize like, it's a normal thing to get overwhelmed, but you just have to like, be present and try to talk yourself through it, as opposed to just like giving stuff up all the time. And
but it's amazing to me how just that little bit is enough.
You know what it was though for me, I think when that happened specifically, like I was starting to say, when I got off stage, right after it happened, I ran off stage and I saw my dad backstage and I bawled. And if you ask him about this, he'll tell you. It was like the most surreal moment ever, but I have never felt that amount of happiness in my life. And when I was on stage, I just knew, like, it was just like this moment of like, yes, like this is what I'm supposed to feel, And I'd never felt like that before. It doesn't matter, what I've done ever since. If I'm not on stage, like I don't get the same feeling doing other things. And that was the first time that I had like really experienced that. Like you actually have something that you could actually do this, And ever since then, I've been chasing that feeling,
Yeah.
I really have. But I think it was just, the moment of like looking at my dad and like realizing I could do it. And then just like, I bawled. I ran right to him and I just gave him a huge hug and I was just like bawling. And I remember after that day, I had a conversation. So I was still in university at this time and we were driving somewhere. I don't know where we were, but I remember saying to him, I'm like, Dad, like, this is what I want to do. And I said that to him and he's like, okay, all right. So what are we going to do? So right. And then we had, that whole talk and I agreed that I would finish university because I was already halfway through. And right. I said,
I think you were just finishing up the last time we talked, right?
Yeah. So I had just, I was halfway through and I wanted to just drop everything and be like, no, because I knew that that's what I was going to do. But I was like, you know what, I'm halfway through, I'm going to finish. And, all the while I started working on it and I was recording my songs after that. And I was doing everything that I possibly could. And, I started playing guitar and singing for the first time in front of people. Like I would do it by myself, but I started playing acoustic gigs, which I was terrified of doing because I was afraid everyone was going to make fun of me for my guitar playing skills.
I still get that fear.
I'm good. I can, I've polished myself up over the years, but at the time I had just learned how to strum chords and I was, up there pretending that I knew what I was doing. But
I say I've gotten to myself just to the point where people no longer throw food at me.
Isn't that a great moment? Right. Love that.
I got home clean today.
Yeah, so I totally get that for sure. Yeah.
So talk to me about the last 2 years then.
Oh wow. The last 2 years.
Because you've been busy.
Yeah, and since the last time we talked, a lot has changed. So
because you went from being a student who might be a musician one day to being this musician who's like doing some
doing
shit.
It. Now I'm doing stuff.
I'm like doing stuff and making music, maybe.
Yeah. Well, when I talked to you last, I was still living in Windsor. I did not have my own band yet. I was still, I had my first EP out, and I think that's what we were discussing live today. It was my first EP. Since then, so much has happened. I have now a second EP out that I started working on. I was going back and forth from here to Toronto, working with a producer and engineer and songwriter there. And I made the decision to move to Toronto last summer. Okay. So it'll be about a year ago. Yeah, and I mean, I just got to the point where I said to myself, there's a lot of opportunity in Toronto, which I had very briefly seen just in my short time of being there. And I knew that I had to do it. I kind of had like a moment of, it's now or never for you. Mm-hmm. Like you're either going to stay in Windsor or you're going to go for it and do it. And, then I said to myself, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Talk to me about working in Toronto versus working here. Because this is a conversation that, I mean, you know this as well as anybody else, but this is a conversation that happens in every bar room in this city.
For sure.
It's a conversation that happens in probably more than just this city. Mm. But when you compare life as a working artist in a city like Windsor versus a place like Toronto, I think Christian Aldo said it on the show. Like he said moving to Toronto was like somebody just opened the lid and went, oh, here, this is like, welcome to the fucking world.
Listen, like, and that's one thing that I learned. Even just, like I said, just in my short trips going back and forth, you feel a vibe just coming into the city. And the more time you spend in the city, you start meeting people. And you just realize, like, how big the world is. You don't realize when you're in, your hometown. And not that there's anything wrong. I love Windsor. Like, it's my home. I love it. And I've done a lot of cool stuff here, even just with the amount of talent and people that are here. I can't. Like, they've all helped to shape me into who I am now, and I couldn't have done that without them. But if you are looking to try and push yourself to the next level, unfortunately, you gotta get out and you have to start connecting to other people. You have to make connections. That's just the biggest thing.
It's a numbers game.
It really is at the end of the day, but none of that is worth it if you don't love what you're doing. Right. And that's just the bottom line. For me, it's worth it, and it's difficult because you don't just go there and have everything handed to you. That's not how it works. I mean, that's not really how it works for anything in life. Right. But
it isn't.
But it's
shit.
Here you go.
I have to start doing stuff.
Yeah, no. It definitely doesn't work that way. But I've just learned that if you want something, you have to go after it. That's just the bottom line. And for me, I moved there, and it's so funny when you work hard. It's like things start happening, mm-hmm. And you go there kind of blindly, and you're kind of like, I don't really know what's going to happen. And, there's still a part of me now that's sort of like, I don't know what's going to happen. That's
actually my favorite part of it, because you just said something that everybody says. And again, I have a problem with these things that we say to each other to sort of explain stuff off that doesn't really explain things, mm-hmm. right? And it's that idea that, oh, you work hard and things just happen. Okay, what does that even mean? And it's funny because, like, once you've gone through it, you get it, mm-hmm. right? Like, you get it. Okay, all right. There's those days where you stare at a window for 8 hours, right. and you hate yourself for 8 full hours, and that was your work day. And like,
listen, that's how it happens for some people, right?
But what did it look like for you? What was that hard work? What were the things that you put in place?
So I'll start even before I moved to Toronto. The hard work for me, first of all, I identified what my strengths and weaknesses were. And I knew that with my amount of performing experience, I knew that performing, I have that down. I'm confident with that. And I knew that I didn't need much work. You can always improve, of course, but that was one thing I was confident with. My songwriting, pretty good. I knew could be better. The only way to be a better songwriter is to write with better writers. And that was one thing that I've learned. You know, the more you collaborate with other people, you learn a lot about the world around you and who you are as an artist and a songwriter. And you don't do that by writing by yourself in your basement. It's just not how it works. You go into a city that's bigger and better, and you write with people that are better, and that's how you get better. For me...
Wait, unless you're a terrible musician, and now this is my advice, right? Because I almost do the same thing, except since nobody will be my friend.
I'll be your friend.
What I do, okay.
Want to write with me?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, no.
But that means this is the way you get, this is how you do it. Pure
Like
sympathy.
This is how, now I feel bad.
No,
Now I
you're
feel like I
right.
have to.
So anyway, or what you do is like myself, I like just sitting down and learning new songs to cover is like giving like just open open ideas that I would never figure like what is this, like that can go with that. So we were sort of talking before, like I'm not a theory guy, neither are you, right? So like having those experiences I think really kind of widen your...
And that's part of it too for me, right? So that, you know, like I said before I had even moved to Toronto, once I was done university, I spent probably a full, and I still do this to some extent, but I had spent probably 1 or 2 years in my basement at home practicing everything that I could. So I would practice my vocals, my guitar playing. I wasn't very good. I made myself learn because I knew that would be, you know, a good tool in helping to push my songwriting forward and for me to play live. And I would practice my piano, and I actually would make myself go over theory just for myself because I got to a point where I was actually, at that age, I was actually interested in learning it. It's not funny. It's not funny how that changes.
Yeah.
Because when I was younger, I had no interest at all.
And you have to be interested.
Yes. Because it's one of those things, honestly, I really do think that. And I feel like...
Well, it's learning a language. I think that's one I think that's a thing that people just sort of pass by, is that, some people can learn music and some people... No, anybody can learn music.
Absolutely.
You just have to understand you're learning a new language.
Yes.
And you have to think about it that way, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to trip.
No. Oh my gosh, please interrupt more. Hello, my name is AJ. Honestly, I did that every single day for probably anywhere between 8 and 10 hours a day. I would be in the basement and I would allocate a few hours for each thing that I thought needed work. And I did that for 2 years, where I finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm comfortable. I can play by myself now. I don't need a band behind me, or I don't need to sing karaoke. I can do it. Not that there's anything wrong with that. For me,
okay, stop, because I totally, absolutely understand all the caveats you're fucking laying out there. But you and I both know, and this is coming from a guy who's been talking about using backing tracks.
Okay, hang on.
Yep.
I play with backing tracks though,
yep.
So there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No.
I'm just saying for myself, I wanted to be able, I didn't want to give anybody any reason to say no to me for anything.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that my vocals were on point. I wanted to make sure that my live performance was on point. I wanted to make sure I could play at least 2 instruments, enough to be able to accompany myself. Not that I need to be, this crazy shredder or anything, but now I'm at that point. I wanted my songwriting to be good enough that I can, record and sing my own music live, potentially, pitch it to other people, see if they're interested in working with me. And I did all of that. I forced myself to read books all the time, which I know that sounds so silly, but that helps so much, especially with songwriting. And that was one thing that I dismissed.
Books, nothing to do with music.
No, but also music as well. But but actually reading books, making myself actually go and buy novels and read, and because that was one thing I didn't really do that. I would find I would reach a lot of roadblocks when I was writing because my vocabulary wasn't that great. And not that it was bad, but I definitely wanted to be better, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And just forcing yourself to listen to music of all genres, because they help to trigger other ideas as a songwriter too. But anyways, story short.
But all of that stuff is really important, because I think that's the stuff that really gets glossed over, right? You hear these stories At least I do. I'm a guy, obviously I like doing this stuff. So all the stuff I listen to is these kinds of interviews. Okay? So maybe nobody else spends their time listening to these guys. But when I hear these interviews, you kind of hear the same sort of trope. So like, oh, I battled with mental illness and I worked my way through. It's like, if I'm staring out my fucking window for hour number 7.
The visual that you're creating is just staring at your window.
Been there.
But for
been
real,
there,
yeah,
right?
I feel like we all have it.
Sometimes that really is what it is. It's just sort of like not knowing what to do to the point where you can't convince yourself to do anything. Mm-hmm. And when you're sitting through that, you feel like you're the only person to ever go through that moment.
But that still happens, even for me. You still have moments where you work so hard and you accomplish things that you're like, holy crap, like I'm freaking, I accomplished something and I feel so great about myself. But then, things come down again and you go, okay, now what? And then you go through this whole
phrase.
But listen, and that's, I feel, where a lot of musicians sort of lie. Musicians and artists and bands that are out there trying so hard to make it, and you have a little bit of success and then it gets taken away from you, and you have, moments of, you're just kind of like laying there doing nothing, and that's extremely difficult. It's a very hard pill to swallow,
I think especially for writers, but creatives across the board. 'Cause I've been lucky enough, I've talked to people in a bunch of different genres, and these stories are basically, they're so similar, right? I think those moments that we sort of spend staring out the windows or whatever are the recharge moments. Like, and I'm getting to the point more and more now where I start to get pissed off with myself for wasting my time being pissed off at myself for the wasting time stuff. Because like at the end of the day, what you realize is like, oh, I just needed that recharge. Yes. I needed that time away.
That is one thing that I've learned, that, like I spent those 2 years working on myself so much, but I would get frustrated, and I found I would work myself to the point where I would be like, okay, like why is nothing happening? And then you freak out. But it's, it's so important to recharge and just like allow yourself to just breathe sometimes and do nothing. Like that's really okay. Where the problems lie, that's where you're doing nothing all the time, and you're not
when you decide
you're not doing anything for weeks and weeks and weeks. Then that's where you run into problems.
Easy to fall on that trap though.
For sure it is. But once in a while, like you deserve to have some time off where you're not just like killing yourself trying to work on your craft all the time.
What's your kick in the ass? When you find yourself in those moments when you're like, okay, like you're going and then you start to recognize, oh, this has been going on for far too fucking long.
I don't really know. I think I've been doing it long enough now that when I have it's almost just like it's an automatic thing for me now, where I'll have like a day off, where I allow myself to do nothing, and I'll say that to myself. Listen, you deserve to have a day off. Do nothing. Spend time with your family, with your friends. Do whatever you want to do. Tomorrow you start again, and I think that's also important as well. You can take some time off, and you deserve time off for all the hard work that you're putting in, right? But then you have to come back. And
sort of got to make yourself learn to earn it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I that's another thing that I've learned, is that you never stop working and you never stop pushing yourself. You can't anyways. Otherwise, I feel you stand still. So even for me, like I said, I spent all that time practicing and doing all that stuff. I definitely don't spend, as much time with each thing anymore like I did, but I needed to spend that time in the beginning to get to where I wanted to be. But now I still polish up and I do all of that stuff even still, now that I've reached a point where I'm pretty confident overall with everything. But I'm always practicing. I'm always working on stuff in some capacity, and I think that's important. But at the end of the day, if you love what you do, you just do it because you love to do it, And I think that's part of it for me. You have days where you're like, yeah, you know what, I need to take a rest, but you go back to it because you want to go back to it. And I feel like if you don't feel that way about it, then maybe that's not your passion.
Maybe it's not your thing.
Yeah. And so when people say that to me, like I don't want to do it, like, okay, well, you obviously don't, you must not love it then, in my opinion. That's because I've experienced loving something so much that, and wanting something so badly that you can't imagine wasting time, right?
Well, except that you wanted it so bad you wasted so much time. Right?
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like at some point, it's funny because again, going back to even though we experience it, sometimes we don't even recognize it.
Right.
Because like I totally get it. You and I have both run into a number of people who tell you, this is, oh, I've got this big dream to do all kinds of stuff that it would be nice if you ever got off the couch, kind of thing.
Starting to sweat now. Sorry.
Sorry.
Excuse me.
I didn't mean to put you under that kind of pressure.
Sorry. Please continue.
But I think a lot of times is even those people, when they say it, they mean it.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of don't know how to.
And that's another thing too. But
which freaks me the fuck out.
Sometimes you don't know the steps to take.
Right.
Right. And I get that. And I think a lot of people, I'm sure, look at me and go, you're lucky because you have a musical family that has experience and they know what they're doing, and which is true. However, I think the music industry and everything in this world is ever changing. It's constantly changing. It's not all the same all the time. And I think for yourself, it doesn't matter if you grow up in a music family or you don't. If it's something that you love to do, you have to get out there. You have to experience it for yourself. You have to meet people, like I said, and surround yourself with people that know more than you. Try to make connections with people that can help you and be better in whatever it is that you're doing. I know 1,000,001 artists and musicians that haven't had no musical background at all, that have just, they are where they are now. But I've had a musical background and I'm right where they are too. So it's like,
yep.
Where does that, I don't know. I find it interesting.
It's funny to me because I think the main advantage, because you and I talked a lot about this the first time, but because like I said, that was so early on in the podcast, I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot more people since then. And I think what's sort of just been true to me along the way is that when you talk to the people who are lucky enough like yourself to come up through a family that sort of understood the music industry for what it was, I think the advantage that you guys get is that you have somebody to let you know, like, yeah, okay, you're a musician. All the other stuff that looks like hurdles, that's just the business. But yeah, you've got the music part. Where people like me, who came from a family that didn't have a musical background, have no buffer. So when you strive for successes and you hit the just natural failures or whatever, instead of you taking that on as like, oh, that's how it works and blah, 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 you start to feel like, oh, maybe I'm not good enough at this thing that I do. And I think that might be the one sort of, I think that's the one major advantage people in your shoes have. Just you don't have to break through that hurdle, and I think that puts you that much further ahead.
Yeah, and I think you might be right about that. I do think, because even for me though, I know growing up I had to experience that myself. Even having, the music background and witnessing things happening around me and, sort of having that experience, I still had to experience it myself. I find that it's not the same as just watching it happen around you. When you're experiencing it yourself, it's a lot harder. You have to learn how to deal with it yourself. And I think in a way, having a music background, that in a way almost makes it harder to deal with certain things.
Yeah.
I think it does, and it's to a certain extent. I get what you're saying though, I do, but I had to experience that myself too.
Oh, see, it's what's funny, and this is, but it's almost what I call the pretty girl syndrome, where it's like I come from a place where being
what's that?
Well, I come from a place where being the pretty girl, and this, comes with all kinds of advantages, until you figure out what all the disadvantages that come with it are, and it takes almost like a real smack in the face to go, okay, those advantages look cool until.
I think it's so hard to speak to any of that now. I just feel like so much has changed, and no matter who you are, like, you have people that are from every type of background that look a certain way, and some people are successful, some people aren't, and it's like, how... There's no way to know what to do. And that's the hard part, I think. It's like, at the end of the day for me, and I know I've said this before to many people that ask me what my goal is. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And for me, what I want to achieve is that feeling that I felt on that stage a few years back. And I get that feeling by being on stage performing. And for me, in whatever capacity that might be, if I'm able to, earn a living, achieving that feeling, then I've done exactly what I want to do. Yeah. That doesn't mean I need to be famous. That doesn't, that's not the goal for me. The goal for me is achieving that amount of happiness that I've never felt doing anything else. And for me, I can't rest until I know I've done everything in my absolute power to achieve that. And if I don't achieve exactly that, I know that I'm going to do something to do with that in some capacity. And I've known that I have to, because there's nothing else that I can do that I would feel fulfilled,
It's funny because one of the questions I was going to ask earlier and then decided to sort of pass by, and I'm still kind of passing it by.
Bring it up.
But is the idea that, like, I know what it's like to try to develop as like the solo acoustic artist guy, right? Like the bar gig guy. I can't imagine, because it's not a world I'm super interested in, but I can't imagine, just because like there's so much else wrapped around it, but trying to make it in the pop world is like, it's a different package entirely, right? So, but to bring that idea back around to what you were just saying, like, I just recently saw a concert with Pink, and Pink amazes the shit out of me, right?
Like, I honestly, like, what are you doing? She's insane.
She really is, and her new stuff. Like I remember first when she first started doing like the rope stuff, like the right. And now, have you seen her latest tour? Like, she's literally flying around the fucking stadium.
She's flying.
Yeah, right. Like, it's insane.
It's just beyond your level of comprehension until you see it with your eyes.
And it's like, really crazy. And the thing is like, I think the pop world gets that superficial, like that veneer that has to go around the pop world. I think that superficial veneer takes away from the fact that behind some of these, like some of the great artists in the pop world is exactly that, great artists. And it goes back to exactly what you were saying, like, oh, what's the next thing I could do? Like, what's the coolest thing you could do? But in the pop world, in order to do any of that, you have to play with all of that superficial shit. Talk to me about that.
I think to an extent. I think to an extent you're right, but I would argue that I don't think it's just in the pop world. I think
fair. I
do think that happens in any genre of music, and I think part of that is just the way the music industry is now. I just think there's so many artists and so much talent that it's very hard to achieve a career, in doing this. And I think whether it's pop artists or whoever, I think what they try to find different things that can make them stand out, that separate them from all the other artists that are out there. In Pink's defense, like, you don't see any other artist doing that, right? Flying through, like,
go ahead and fucking try.
Yeah, listen, I'm gonna just sit back and watch you. So good for you. That's awesome. I'm not gonna do that.
Right.
But no, I think there is something to be said for that. I think it's, and the one question that you're constantly asked is what makes you different, and I think that's a little bit hard as an artist to swallow, because you're like, well, I'm me, and that should be enough, right? And it should be enough. I think there's a little bit of the game playing though too. I think you're right about that. I think some artists definitely do that. I think for me, I haven't gotten to a point where I felt like I need to, do something crazy, like, do backflips on stage or something, but maybe one day I'll get to that point, and then
do you I would assume that you look at people like Pink and Gaga and Madonna and sort of like look at their careers almost as roadmaps. Do you look at that side of it? Do you look at the marketing side of it? Do you think about that kind of, where's your head sit with all that? Like, when do we see you in a meat dress?
Tomorrow night, it comes to Cornfest. Come check me out.
100%.
It's in a steak dress.
Right?
Oh, dear God. I'll have a platter with little steak pieces for all the guests. It's, it's just so hard to say. I think, like I said, I'm at a point now where I haven't felt like I need to do something like, look at me, Again, for me, I do this because I love to do this, and I'm just trying to achieve that feeling that I felt. And for me, it's not a game to me. I'm doing it because I genuinely really love it. However, the music industry around you, it a little bit is like that, because they ask you that. They say, what makes you different? So at the end of the day, you have to just sort of stick to your guns and be who you want to be as an artist. And you have to, if you're lucky enough to find a team that understands that and is willing to help push you forward with your morals and values as an artist and who you want to be, then those are the people that you should stick with, right? And I'm so lucky that I have found those people. They didn't just like, come to me. I had to, get out there and make connections with people and meet strangers, and but you only do that by putting yourself out there, and you gravitate to the right people. That's what I've found anyways. So
how's your story been? You run into any scary moments? Because I know there can be real shitty stories that come along with this stuff.
With any
of it.
Okay, well, I have one. I don't think this is what you were talking about,
okay.
But I'm going to share it with you anyway.
Sure. Now I'm even more intrigued.
You know what? But just to give you an idea of the power and scares of social media. So I experienced something in Toronto. At the time, actually, I was still living in Windsor, and I had booked a show at the Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto. And I went there, and some random guy, I'd never seen him in my entire life, but he came up to me and genuinely thought he knew who I was and that we were friends. And he had followed me on Instagram, and he came up to me saying, "It's David from Instagram." Like, that's what he was saying. Like, he was so adamant that, like, we're friends and, like, we know each other. And I was like, that was, that moment for me was really scary, because I had finally realized, like, truly, you're putting yourself out there all the time, and to strangers, to the entire world. And not only are you doing that, but you're telling people where you are, and they're showing up. So,
God damn it, I asked for a thing and it happened.
Listen, like, that moment for me was eye-opening.
Did you have anybody else with you at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, and I had my whole band. If you ask my band guys, they'll tell you what happened. And funnily enough, this guy ended up being fine. Years later, he shows up to my gigs still, and he's actually just like a fan. He's very nice, but however, when it first happened, I was like just mortified. Like it finally hit me where I was like, you gotta be careful, because these people, like, they're random and you have no idea who they are. And he thought we knew each other. Like, he was very like, we're friends. No, I don't know who you are.
Wow, it's funny.
Very scary.
Because I've never had anything like that, but because of the show, I get people that'll come up to me, and I love it. I never have a problem with it. I want to meet anybody who watches. I'm amazed anybody spends any fucking time watching this shit, right? So, I can barely sit through it, and I'm forced to. So, but
that's so nice. Oh,
but I really do appreciate those conversations, but they come up in so many strange ways. Like, sometimes people come up to you like they're your best friends, like they've known you forever. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, like, I've had people come up to me and start by telling me how much they love the show, follow that up with a bunch of things that tell me they've never really seen the show, and then end the conversation by telling me what a piece of shit I was. And it was just kind of like,
thanks.
Oh, thanks
for coming.
That was fun. All right.
You know what? And so on that point, I've again sort of coming back to social media. For me, I've started receiving some, like, messages from people that think, they should share their opinion with me about what I'm doing and what I'm doing wrong, and that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it. But there's a way to do it, and I get everyone has an opinion about stuff, and that's great. But one thing you need to have is thick skin.
Tact.
And that. But you need to have thick skin. You can't people are gonna judge you and hate what you're doing.
Everybody has an idea to make what you're doing better. Yeah.
Everyone thinks they know, and the bottom line is, unless you're in the situation yourself and you're the artist and you're the one going through everything, I tell you, it's not a walk in the park. But if you love it, you do it, and that's the bottom line. You have people all around you telling you all the time what they think you should be doing and what they don't like about what you're doing and what they think you should be doing, and you just, thanks. That's all you can do, and you have to just be yourself and be okay with that.
Yep.
And that was hard for me, even growing up, like I said, being who I was and just accepting that, and finally coming to the realization that you can't please everybody. And that was hard for me. I was like a people pleaser growing up, and now I feel so much different now. I have a huge change that I've noticed.
You came from a place with a lot of expectation on you, though, right? For
sure, and not in a bad way.
Sure.
I honestly, like, God bless my parents. They're incredible, and I wouldn't be where I am today without them. I think the amount of expectations they did put on us, it helped me to be, the person that I am. I think I had a lot of pressure on me, for sure, and part of that, I think, was because just in school in general, I was not a good student. And not because I, was trying to be a bad student. I always remember, like, I can try to remember the memory that I have. It's like back, like in grade 2. Like, I can remember feeling like I wasn't like everybody else in terms of learning, like I always felt like I was learning slower. I wasn't grasping concepts back in grade 2. Like, I can picture myself in the classroom right now. And I've always felt like that growing up. And I think for me, with my parents, because I did so bad in school, like that was hard to get past, and I always had the music that I was doing on the side, but because I did so bad in school, it's like I was disciplined so much for that. And I, didn't really showcase what I was actually good at. So it's like altogether your confidence is just,
yeah,
non-existent. And I think that's sort of what happened with me. But the expectations they put on me, I mean, you need those, I think. I think you need expectations put on you, especially as a young child, when you're trying to find yourself in the world. I think you need guidance. And my parents were wonderful. I'm very grateful for them, for sure.
So we've gone all over the deep psychological mumbo jumbo. Let's get to the highlights, because you've had some really cool shit going on.
Yeah.
Some really cool shit.
Should I announce the big shit?
Well, let's work up to the big shit. Let's
talk about the little shit and work up to the big shit.
Let's talk about the contest first of all, because that was pretty big.
Yeah, that was crazy for me, and the opportunity came up to submit for the Jim Beam National Talent Search. So you just submit as an artist or as a band your original music, and they sort of narrow it down within a bunch of regions throughout Canada. 5 finalists within each region across Canada, and I ended up being picked as one of the 5 in Toronto. So that was that whole thing. So what ended up happening was we had to do a performance, and then obviously there were judges, and they had to choose who the finalist was going to be from that region. So I ended up winning the Toronto region, which was really, really cool. I wasn't even expecting that, and I honestly, growing up with competitions and all that stuff, I have no expectations, genuinely. Like, I don't go in with any sort of, like, yes, I got this. Like,
right, because you learned they're all nonsense to begin with. Yeah.
And not all of them. Sometimes it's genuine, but
even the good ones are nonsense, and they know that.
It's just, it's so subjective at the end of the day. So it's like, what do you, like, and then you take it to heart, and it's just a bunch, like, So I know that. I've known and recognized that feeling growing up, and so any sort of, like, competition stuff, I'm like, whatever. I do it for the experience and for the exposure at this point for me, if I feel like it's necessary. And that's sort of what I did. So I just did it. I went up on stage, I did my thing, and I ended up winning the Toronto region, which was really cool. So what ended up happening was they picked 1 finalist from each region, and I believe there were 10. There was 10 finalists in total, and they ended up choosing 1 finalist from all 10, and they ended up choosing me for Canada, which was Insane. So the prize for that was to perform at the Indie Awards in Toronto. And then...
How did that go?
Oh, it was crazy.
Talk to me about that show.
Well, first of all, I had never performed at that big of a venue in Toronto.
Where was it?
So it was at the Phoenix Concert Theatre.
Okay.
So I had never performed there. What do I say? I don't know. For me, even just being new to Toronto, doing something like that, I was like, great. This is perfect. Great way to start, and we're good to go. It was amazing. It was amazing. I had a really great time, and I opened up the show, and I opened up for the other artists that were performing, and it was really cool. Even just meeting the other artists and being there with my band guys, and that's, even my band, they don't get enough credit. They're amazing. And I can't do that without them either. All the live shows, everything that I've done, they're backing me up, and they're all stellar musicians, and I'm just like, I'm so lucky to have them.
And I like that you're tapping out of hometown stuff a lot of times too.
Listen, I'm a hometown girl. Windsor is my baby, and I have a hard time. That was hard. It's hard leaving here, leaving your home, and especially for me being so close to like friends and especially my family, like that was really, really difficult. But
well, I wonder if you'll ever get an opportunity to play to your hometown again.
Well, so funny that you mentioned that, because now, shall we move on to the next?
Segue Express.
Segue. Yes, and now it is confirmed that I will be opening up for Walk Off the Earth in the Coliseum, November 7th.
That is amazing.
Which is crazy. I can't... Is that happening? Oh, wow, it's happening. It's for real. It's real life, yeah. So...
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Now, by the time you guys are watching this, will have been announced for a while, but we're
right
actually...
now, it's not...
It's not even officially... It's not a... Yeah, so it's still very fresh for you, right?
Yeah. It's fresh. I'm a little bit freaking out. I'm like in a really good way. So one of my goals was to be back on that Coliseum stage. I was there for the first time when I was 19, and I loved the stage, and I'm just, I'm so happy. I can't wait. And in my hometown, like what else, what else could you ask for? It's amazing. That was one of my goals, and I can check that off the list very soon. So
I guess the last thing, we'll sort of end on this, because one of the things that impresses me so much about you and what you're doing is everything you're doing on your own. Not your own, like you've got a team and stuff.
Of course.
But your team is your team.
Yes.
It's not a team that you went and signed up with some people and they assigned some people to you and they're doing things. You have built this thing from the ground up.
Yeah, I really have. And it started with my producer. So him and I sort of hooked up, and then we ended up, bringing in the engineer, and, we built it together. And it's like now I'm at the point where it's like, I'm still an independent artist. I'm not signed with anybody, and we've done everything that I have done up until this point. I wasn't handed the opportunities. I've worked for them, and we worked to get them, and I'm grateful, but I worked really hard, and I'm very happy with how things have turned out so far. And as of now, the way things are going, I'm just, it just validates that moving to Toronto was the right choice for me, and it's just still going, and I'm very happy. Even with the team, like they're great, but it is possible to do it on your own. You have to go and do it. And
I think it now more than ever, the only way you can do it is on your own.
Yeah, and I think there might be exceptions to that.
However, I think once you do it on your own for long enough, somebody might come along, but you have to bust your ass for a long time. I agree.
Yeah. And that's, and that's sort of where I'm at right now. I'm like, it's great doing it on your own, because you do it by your rules, and you do what you want to do, and you find a team that loves you and respects you and tries to push you forward as you are. And, of course, there's little things here and there that you have, there's just certain protocol that you have to follow, and that's just part of being an artist, and that's what you have to do. But as a whole right now, I feel like I've developed into who I am as an artist, and it's extremely exciting to be able to say, like, these songs are me, and I'm me. I'm dressing how I want to dress, and I'm posting how I want to post, and that's a fantastic feeling. And I hope that I'm able to continue that.
I can't wait to see where you take it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, there's links below to Chrstee and all of our incredible sponsors. Make sure you check those out. Also, click the subscribe button, knock the bell, hit the like, all the other happy horse shit you got to do because it's 2019. And if you don't do that, then nobody knows that you like our stuff and then nobody pays attention anymore. That's how that works, I think.
Unfortunately.
Go check out all her stuff, too. It's amazing.
Thank you.
See you next time, folks.
That was so fun. Oh my God, you're the best.
It was so good.